Welcome agents back to part 2 of my Title Update 6 and Episode 2 review. In the first part I focused on Episode 2 and I'd highly recommend you check that out if you have not already. To summarise, I think that Episode 2 was disappointing and added no real replayable content. Even for the very casual player who may only just get 1 hour of playtime per night, once you've done the 2 main missions, there is no activity worth replaying, which kind of is really bad because it forces build making to become almost null and void. I mean, what's the point investing all this time into a build without any activity to use it? Anyway, I digress. That was part 1. For part 2, this part will be focusing on Title Update 6, which was the long anticipated quality of life update that focused on loot, RNG and PvP. And let's just say this is going to be vastly more positive compared to part 1. So let's get into this. So as I said at the start, Title Update 6 is the long-awaited quality of life change the game has needed since launch, and boy does it deliver on that. The biggest feature has to be the new targeted loot system. This system was introduced to help alleviate the horrible RNG issues, showing you exactly where certain gear, weapons and mods will be dropping in the world. You essentially can find the stuff that you want, where it's dropping, what activity, what zone, whatever, and as the title suggests, you are targeting the loot that you need. Now, one of the biggest problems pre-TU6 or Title Update 6 was the RNG, with one person doing the math and confirming that your chances of getting the piece of gear that you want with the right attributes is pretty much zero. This system has removed one huge layer of RNG, that being the brand of gear or the weapon type or mod, and that's a huge step forward in achieving a balanced grind versus reward atmosphere. To further enhance the targeted loot system, developers included a daily rotation, which is just really good foresight. My worry with this new system initially was it would become boring to keep playing, the same mission or keep replaying the same area, for that specific item that you're after. But this daily rotation kind of solves that. And for me, this is just really great, and it's actually seen me playing a lot of missions or going to a lot of areas I haven't been to in a very long time, and that's a good thing. If the developers can double down on this, I think we're going in the right direction. And I have to say, this new targeted loot system for me, alongside the named items that I talked about in episode 2 and in the first part of this review, is one of the best additions to the game. If you left the Division 2 because, RNG was just too much for you, I'd highly recommend you come back and try this out because it's a lot better now. So next up is Recalibration and Crafting. Now, it's no secret that the community wanted to get more use out of these, and the developers have introduced some very good changes here. Firstly, the new Recalibration interface is much better than before. It's cleaner, it's easier to navigate, and it's easier to use. Probably the biggest change to the recal station was the ability to recalibrate different stat types over each other. For example, offensive being red to utility being yellow. Now, what this has done is it's created a situation where you've essentially got a lot more freedom and control over the build that you're trying to achieve. And from my experience and from having looked into the community feedback on this particular feature, it appears this system is working fine. And it has not broken the game. That was one of the things that I wasn't too sure about and what people did comment about. But at the moment, at least, it doesn't appear to have broken the game. And this is obviously very good news. Another great change with the recal station is the ability to recalibrate items that are located in your stash, which, whilst just a small change, is a really positive quality of life adjustment that just really helps with the flow and just makes the flow feel a lot better. On to crafting, there's some very good changes here as well. Overall, the crafting costs have been reduced, allowing you to craft and or recalibrate far more often. Enemies now drop higher amounts of crafting materials by almost double, with green mats up to 12 from 6 and blue materials up to 9 from 4. The biggest change in respect of crafting mats is the inventory size. Base material caps is now up from 600 to 2000 with green, and blue materials up from 400 to 1500. These changes that have increased your overall inventory and reduced the cost of recalibration or crafting, it all just works well, and it all works towards a much more fluid experience. Oh, and did I forget to say that you can now recalibrate crafted items? The quality of life changes here they're pretty fantastic. If there's one thing the community was asking for, however, it was to allow the recal of one attribute and one talent, rather than just the one recal in total. The developers didn't make that change here, and they've never said why. On paper, it appears to be another very good change, further reducing what still is, some pretty brutal RNG. So maybe the devs could consider this for the next update. If this is not possible, then I think it's probably a good idea for the devs to say why. This is by far the most requested change I've seen since TU6 has come out and before, and it's not been implemented. So it'll be good to understand what's getting in the way of making this happen. Because, like I said, on paper, to me it just means that we're going to have more opportunities in getting the gear that we want, and that's a good thing. The largest portion of Title Update 6 was the vast amount of balancing changes made to almost every piece of gear, talent, weapon, you name it, it's been changed in the game. In the lead up to the update, there was a lot of controversy. The developers made a bold decision to nerf the Eagle Bearer, which received a lot of applause from some and a lot of bad language from others. I, as most of you know, was on the side of the Eagle Bearer being rebalanced, but I wanted the weapon to still be best in slot. Just. The devs made the decision to nerf the base damage, but what they did was buff the exotic talents, and I have to say, no one seems to be complaining anymore. Now, whilst it doesn't mean people are not happy with the changes, this community is very vocal, so I suspect the lack of comments about this weapon means people are generally okay with how it is right now. Now, I'm going to say that's a good job to Massive. In respect of the other exotic weapons, the balancing appears to have worked well. Nemesis base damage reduced by 10%, but the damage is still very strong. Pestilence is now very viable and one of the best LMGs in the game right now. The Diamondback built properly can now absolutely hold its weight. Overall, the exotic balancing seems to be good, and now more than ever, you'll be able to use all of them and achieve something. It's going to be impossible for me to list every single balancing change with gear and weapons and pretty much everything in the game individually, going through each one and critiquing them. So instead, my overall opinion of these balancing changes are positive. I've not played PvP or PvE since launch where players are using a wider variety of weapons, gear and thus builds. There is of course going to be a meta, which appears to be a bleed type build, but I've never seen so many build videos here on YouTube that appear to be really effective. And this is really good. This is exactly what the game needed, so I'm just very happy that now I can use an M4, I can use the Pestilence, and with the right build to match, I can have a good time. In the first part of this review, I talked about how all of these Title Update 6 changes indirectly affected how PvP was, because there really wasn't any PvP specific changes, except for one. What the devs did do with PvP, which directly affected how it works, was make changes to normalization. Player stats will no longer be modified, and agents receive their full recalibration bonuses. This is a really good change. The system of boosting players under 500 gear score up to 500 still exists, but the change to normalization means hardcore players who invest their time in recalibrating their gear and getting the most out of it will have the slight advantage over those who don't do that, which is great. It rewards those players for putting in the time. Aside from that, PvP got some other UI changes, but that was really it. Overall, the PvP experience does feel ever so slightly better than pre-TU6, but I can't help but think the devs, like every update before, did very little to improve the core PvP experience. Overall, Title Update 6 is a really good update, and focuses on a lot of changes the community has been asking for since launch. RNG is less brutal now with the new targeted loot system. Recal and crafting costs have been reduced, allowing players to use these functions much more often. The overall balancing of weapons and gear has been huge, and the game certainly feels a lot more fresh now with new builds coming out of the woodwork almost every single day. Not everything has been addressed, of course, but this is a giant leap in the right direction, so I'm going to say more of this, please. I'm very happy with Title Update 6, and I really think it's been received well by the community. There has been some stuff recently talking about one-shot builds, and yes, there are some problems with this update in respect to balancing, but overall, I think the update itself has been very good. Like I said at the start of the video, and in part 1 when I focused on episode 2, however, this is all well and good, but what we really need is some replayable content where all of these changes can actually be useful. I'd just like to say I didn't cover every change in this video. What I did was choose what I believe to be the most important changes and cover both PvE and PvP related material. I hope you enjoyed this review of episode 2 entitled Update 6. I'm excited that all of the quality of life changes appear to be pushing the game in the right direction. I just hope the developers can really nail some good, replayable PvE and PvP content very, very soon. Thanks very much for watching, and until the next one, Epic out.